Lilith never imagined that fixing a broken lock would seal her fate with Park Sung Bae, the ruthless CEO whose cold gaze could freeze hell itself. She wasn't supposed to survive his wrath. She definitely wasn't supposed to survive his bite. But when the Mafia king tasted her blood, something changed. Now, caught between his obsession and her own dangerous attraction, Lilith must decide: run from the monster that marked her, or embrace the darkness he's offering. To continue, you would want to click on the like and subscribe button, as that would make listening more intriguing. Let's get into Lilith's mysterious story. The elevator climbed 47 floors in suffocating silence. Lilith adjusted the heavy toolbox in her grip, her reflection staring back at her from the polished metal doors. Her dark skin glowed against the stark, white uniform of Genesis Security Systems, her natural hair pulled into a neat bun. She'd been in Seoul for 3 years now, building her reputation as the best locksmith and security technician in the city. But today's job made her stomach twist with unease. Park Tower, the headquarters of Park Enterprises, a conglomerate that controlled half of Seoul's nightlife, real estate, and underground operations that nobody dared speak about. And at the very top of this gleaming fortress sat its owner, Park Sung Bae, the CEO whose name was whispered with equal parts reverence and terror. The doors slid open with a soft chime. The 47th floor was nothing like Lilith expected. No bustling assistants, no ringing phones. Just silence, thick and oppressive, broken only by the sound of her boots against imported marble. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass on one side, offering a breathtaking view of Seoul's skyline. On the other side, darkness, rooms with tinted glass that revealed nothing. A woman in an immaculate black suit appeared from nowhere, her face pale, her movements mechanical. "You're the technician?" "That's correct. I received an urgent call about a biometric lock malfunction in the executive suite." The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked like she wanted to say something, warn her maybe, but instead she just nodded. "Follow me. And remember, Mr. Park doesn't tolerate delays, excuses, or incompetence." "Then it's fortunate I'm none of those things," Lilith replied evenly. They stopped before massive double doors, black as obsidian. The woman knocked twice, and then stepped back quickly, as if afraid to linger too long. "Enter." The voice from within was deep, smooth as silk but cold as winter. The doors swung open, and Lilith stepped into Park Sung Bae's office. The room was enormous, bathed in shadows despite the floor-to-ceiling windows. Heavy curtains blocked most of the sunlight, leaving only slivers of illumination that cut through the darkness like blades. And there, behind a desk that looked carved from midnight itself, sat the man who ruled Seoul's shadows. Park Sung Bae. He didn't look up immediately. His attention remained fixed on documents spread before him, his pen moving with precise, elegant strokes. Lilith used the moment to study him. Sharp jawline, skin so pale it seemed to glow in the dim light, hair black as ink and perfectly styled. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her yearly salary, every line tailored to perfection. When he finally lifted his gaze, Lilith's breath caught. His eyes were unlike anything she'd ever seen. Dark, impossibly dark, but with something else lurking in their depths. Something ancient and hungry. They swept over her with the efficiency of a predator assessing prey. "You're the locksmith." It wasn't a question. "I am Lilith Okonkwo. Genesis Security Systems sent me to repair your biometric lock." "You're late." Lilith glanced at her watch. "I arrived exactly at the time specified in the work order." Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps. Clearly, no one contradicted Park Sung Bae. His secretary, still hovering by the door, made a small sound of distress. "Sir, I apologize for her. Leave us." Sung Bae's words cut through the air like a blade. The woman fled, the doors closing with a heavy thud that sounded like a tomb sealing shut. Now, Lilith was alone with him. "The lock," he said, gesturing to a door on the far side of his office. "It leads to my private quarters. Fix it. And understand something, Ms. Okonkwo, I don't accept failure." Lilith met his gaze steadily. "Then we understand each other perfectly, Mr. Park. I don't deliver it." For 3 seconds, silence stretched between them. Then, impossibly, his lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. Not warm, not friendly, but intrigued. How fascinating. Confidence or foolishness? Competence, Lilith corrected, moving toward the door with her toolbox. As she worked, she felt his eyes on her. Not watching her work, but watching her. The weight of his attention was physical, oppressive, making the air feel thicker. The biometric lock was indeed malfunctioning, its circuits fried by what looked like an electrical surge. But as Lilith opened the panel, she noticed something odd. Scratch marks around the edges, deep gouges in the metal that looked almost like claw marks. What caused the surge? She asked, not looking back at him. Does it matter? It does if you want to prevent it from happening again. This damage pattern suggests physical force combined with an electrical malfunction. It's unusual. Many things about my life are unusual, Ms. Okonkwo. The way he said her name, slow and deliberate, sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. Lilith forced herself to focus on the wiring, replacing the damaged circuits with practiced efficiency. 20 minutes later, she'd installed a new biometric scanner, one with backup systems and surge protection. Test it, she said, stepping back. Sung Bae rose from his desk with fluid grace. He moved like water, like shadow, barely making a sound despite his size. When he reached her, standing close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar, and something else, something metallic and strange, he placed his hand on the scanner. It beeped green. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Satisfactory, he said. But he didn't move away. Instead, he studied her face, his gaze lingering on her neck in a way that made her instinctively step back. Will there be anything else, Mr. Park? Tell me, Ms. Okonkwo, are you afraid of me? The question caught her off guard. Lilith met his eyes, those impossibly dark eyes, and answered honestly. Should I be? His smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed just slightly too sharp. Everyone else is. I'm not everyone else. No, he murmured, so softly she almost didn't hear it. No, you're not. Lilith gathered her tools, eager to leave this shadowed office and its unsettling occupant. She was halfway to the door when his voice stopped her. One more thing. She turned. He was standing by the windows now, the filtered sunlight making his skin look almost translucent. My security team will require your services permanently. You'll be assigned to Park Tower exclusively. My assistant will handle the contract details. Expect 3 times your current salary. Lilith's mind raced. That kind of money could change everything. She could send more money home to her family in Lagos, expand her own business, and secure her future in Seoul. But something about this offer felt like a trap, like she was agreeing to more than just a maintenance contract. I'll need to review the terms. Of course. His smile was predatory now. Take your time, Ms. Okonkwo. Though I suspect you'll find my offers difficult to refuse. As Lilith left Park Tower, the autumn sun warm on her face, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a deal with something far more dangerous than a ruthless CEO. The way he'd looked at her neck, the inhuman grace of his movements, those eyes that seemed to glow in the shadows. She shook her head, dismissing her paranoia. Park Sung Bae was just a man. A powerful, dangerous man, but still just a man. She had no idea how wrong she was. The contract arrived at her apartment that same night, hand-delivered by a courier who looked terrified, as if the envelope itself might bite him. Lilith spread the documents across her small kitchen table, reading by the light of her single lamp. The terms were generous to the point of absurdity. Exclusive security maintenance for Park Tower, monthly retainer that was 5 times her current income, full benefits, and a clause that made her stomach flip. She would be on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for any security matters requiring immediate attention. Her best friend Amara's voice echoed in her head. Girl, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. But Lilith thought of her mother's medical bills back home, her younger siblings' school fees, and the tiny apartment she lived in that barely had hot water. This money could change everything. She signed the contract. 3 days later, she received her first midnight call. The phone's shrill ring yanked her from sleep. Lilith fumbled for it, her heart pounding. The caller ID showed only Park Tower. Hello. Ms. Okonkwo. It was him. Park Sung Bae's voice, smooth and commanding even through the phone. I require your services immediately. The lock to my wine cellar has malfunctioned. I need you here within 30 minutes. Lilith glanced at her clock. 2:47 a.m. Mr. Park, with all due respect, couldn't this wait until morning? Silence. Then, so soft it was almost a whisper. Did you not agree to 24-hour availability? I did, but then I'll see you in 30 minutes. Don't be late, Ms. Okonkwo. I find tardiness particularly irritating. The line went dead. Lilith dragged herself out of bed, splashing cold water on her face. Seoul at night was beautiful, neon lights reflecting off wet streets. But Park Tower loomed like a dark monolith against the skyline, most of its windows black except for a single light at the very top. His office. The lobby was deserted, but the elevator was already waiting for her, doors open like a mouth. When she reached the 47th floor, the silence was even more oppressive than during the day. No secretary this time, just empty shadows and that heavy door. Enter, came his voice before she could knock. Sung Bae sat at his desk, looking exactly as he had days ago. Same suit, same perfect hair, as if he never slept, never changed, never moved except when absolutely necessary. But something was different about him tonight. His eyes seemed darker, hungrier, and there was a tension in his jaw that suggested barely restrained violence. The wine cellar, Lilith said, keeping her voice professional. Where is it? He gestured toward the door she'd repaired. Through my private quarters. Down the stairs. Warning bells rang in Lilith's head. His private quarters. At 3 in the morning. Alone. Mr. Park, perhaps we should wait until morning when your security team. Are you refusing? His voice had dropped to something dangerous, something that made every instinct scream at her to run. But Lilith had never been good at listening to her instincts when her pride was involved. Not refusing. Simply suggesting a more appropriate time. I'm suggesting you do your job. He stood, and in the darkness of his office, he seemed larger, more imposing. Now, Ms. Okonkwo. She followed him through the door she'd repaired, into rooms she suspected few people had ever seen. His private quarters were stunning, all dark woods and expensive fabrics, but cold. No photographs, no personal touches, nothing that suggested a human being actually lived here. They descended a spiral staircase that seemed to go down forever, the temperature dropping with each step. Finally, they reached a door. Heavy, ancient-looking, with a lock that was indeed malfunctioning, its electronic panels sparking intermittently. This lock is different from the others, Lilith observed, examining it. Custom design, very old integration of modern technology with traditional mechanics. Where did you get this? It's been in my family for generations, Sung Bae said from behind her. Too close behind her. Modified over the years, but the core mechanism remains unchanged. Lilith forced herself to focus on the work, ignoring the way his presence seemed to fill the narrow hallway, suffocating and magnetic at once. The lock's problem was clear enough. Someone had tried to force it open, damaging the internal mechanisms. She could fix it, but it would take time. This will require at least an hour, she said. The damage is extensive. Then you'd better start. As she worked, Sung Bae watched. Not the casual observation from before, but intense focus, as if studying every movement, every breath. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft clink of her tools. Tell me, Ms. Okonkwo. His voice drifted through the darkness. Why did you come to Seoul? Lilith didn't look up. Opportunity. Better life. You left everything you knew, everyone you loved, for opportunity? Some of us don't have the luxury of inherited wealth, Mr. Park. We build our own. She heard him move, felt him come closer. And do you regret it? Leaving home. Every single day, she admitted quietly. But regret doesn't pay bills or feed families. How pragmatic. How strong. Something in his voice made her turn. He was standing directly behind her now, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him. Cold. In a heated hallway. That wasn't normal. Mr. Park, I need space to work. Space, he repeated, as if tasting the word. Yes, everyone needs space. Distance. Boundaries. He leaned in, and Lilith's breath caught. Tell me, Ms. Okonkwo, what would you do if someone crossed your boundaries? I'd defend them. Her voice was steady despite her racing heart. Firmly. His laugh was soft, dark, appreciative. Defend them. Against me? Against anyone. For a moment, she thought he might back away, might respect the line she'd drawn. Instead, his hand came up, fingers brushing her neck so lightly it might have been imagined. Except she felt it, ice-cold fingers trailing across her pulse point. You have no idea what you're dealing with, do you? He whispered. Lilith jerked away, spinning to face him. Touch me again without permission, and this contract is void. I don't care how much you're paying me. His eyes flashed, something inhuman and terrible flickering in their depths. Then he smiled, and Lilith saw them. Fangs. Real fangs, sharp and white against his pale lips. You should care, Ms. Okonkwo. You should care very much. Her mind refused to process what she was seeing. Tricks of the light, shadows playing games. But then he moved, faster than humanly possible, and suddenly she was pressed against the wall, his body caging hers, his face inches from her neck. You wanted to know why everyone fears me, he murmured against her skin. Let me show you. She felt his breath, cold as death, then the sharp pierce of fangs breaking skin. Pain bloomed hot and bright, followed immediately by something else, a rush of sensation that was terrifyingly close to pleasure. Lilith's scream died in her throat as his venom entered her bloodstream, sending waves of paralysis through her limbs. He drank deeply, and with each pull, she felt her strength draining, her consciousness dimming. This was it. This was how she died. Killed by a monster in a basement in Seoul, her family never knowing what happened, her body probably never found. But then, abruptly, he pulled away. Sung Bae staggered back, his hand pressed to his mouth, his eyes wide with something that looked shockingly like horror. He stared at her, at the blood dripping from his lips, hers, and for the first time since she'd met him, Park Sung Bae looked afraid. What? His voice was rough, shaken. What are you? Lilith slumped against the wall, her hand pressed to her bleeding neck. What am I? You're the one with fangs, you monster. But he wasn't listening. He was staring at his hands, at her blood staining his fingers, as if it had burned him. Your blood. This isn't possible. What isn't possible? Lilith's vision swam, but rage kept her conscious. That you're a vampire? That you just attacked me? Your blood, he repeated, his voice hollow. It tastes of sunlight. Then, before she could respond, before she could demand answers or curse him or run, the world tilted sideways and darkness claimed her. When Lilith woke, she was lying on something soft. Too soft. Her neck throbbed with pain, but when her fingers found the wound, it was already healing, the skin knitting together impossibly fast. She forced her eyes open. She was in a bedroom. Massive, luxurious, bathed in the warm glow of dozens of candles. And sitting in a chair beside the bed, his head in his hands, was Park Sung Bae. You're awake. He didn't look up. I wasn't certain you would be. Lilith tried to sit up, but her body refused to cooperate. What did you do to me? Something unforgivable. Finally, he raised his head, and she saw the anguish in his eyes. Real anguish, raw and terrible. I marked you, tasted you, and in doing so, I've bound us together in ways I never intended. Bound? What are you talking about? He stood, pacing like a caged animal. I am vampire Ms. Okonkwo, ancient, immortal, and normally immune to the weaknesses of my kind. I feed on fear, on the terror of those around me. It sustains me. But your blood. He stopped, his fists clenched. Your blood does something I haven't felt in 300 years. It makes me feel. Lilith's laugh was bitter, hysterical. So your problem is that you're developing empathy? How terrible for you. You don't understand. He turned to her, his expression desperate. For centuries, I've been empty. Cold. I built an empire on fear because fear was all I could taste, all I could feel. But now with you. He gestured helplessly. Now I feel everything. Your pain, your anger, your confusion. It's flooding through me like fire, and I don't know how to stop it. Then let me go, Lilith said. Break whatever bond you created. I can't. His voice broke. A vampire's first mark is permanent. Your blood is part of me now, and I. He closed his eyes. God help me, I don't want to let you go. Silence fell between them, heavy with revelation and fear. Finally, Lilith spoke, her voice cold. Then God help us both, because I will never forgive you for this. Sung Bae's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I don't expect forgiveness, but I will give you a choice, one I should have offered before. Stay. Let me protect you, provide for you. Or leave. Return to your life. And I swear on whatever humanity I have left that I will never approach you again. And the bond will fade with time and distance. You'll be free of me. Lilith stared at him. This monster who wore a man's face, who'd attacked her and now looked at her with something terrifyingly close to longing. Every rational thought screamed at her to run, to get as far from Park Sung Bae as possible. But she thought of the contract, the money, her family's needs. And beneath that practical consideration, something else stirred. Curiosity. anger, and a dark, reckless part of her that wanted to understand what he'd meant when he said her blood tasted of sunlight. "I'll stay," she said finally. "But not because of your bond. And not because you bit me. I'll stay because I choose to. And the moment that changes, I walk away, and you don't stop me." Agreed. "And you never, ever bite me again without explicit permission." Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment maybe, but he nodded. "You have my word." "The word of a monster," Lilith muttered. "The word of a monster who just learned what it means to feel again," he corrected quietly. "Make of that what you will, Ms. Okonkwo." Over the following weeks, Lilith's life transformed in ways she couldn't have imagined. Sung Bae was true to his word. He kept his distance, never touching her, barely speaking to her beyond what was necessary for work. But his presence was constant. She'd arrive at Park Tower to find fresh flowers in her new office, rare African orchids that must have cost a fortune. Her apartment building's hot water suddenly worked perfectly, and when she asked the landlord about it, he stammered something about a generous anonymous donor funding the repairs. Her mother called from Lagos, crying with joy. "Lilith, the medical bills, they've been paid. All of them. They said someone covered everything. Was it you?" Lilith closed her eyes, knowing exactly who had made that payment. "Yes, Mama. I got a promotion." But the strangest changes were the ones she felt inside herself. The bite mark on her neck had healed completely, leaving only the faintest scar, but sometimes, in quiet moments, she'd feel it pulse with warmth. And with each pulse came emotions that weren't her own: longing, regret, hunger. His emotions. The bond worked both ways. One night, unable to sleep, Lilith found herself wandering Park Tower's empty hallways. She told herself she was just checking the security systems, but her feet carried her to that familiar black door. His office. She knocked. "Come in." He sat by the window, the curtains open for once, revealing the Seoul night skyline. He didn't look at her as she entered, but she saw his shoulders tense. "Why can't I stop thinking about you?" Lilith demanded. "Is this bond manipulating my thoughts?" "No." His voice was quiet. "The bond only shares emotions, not thoughts. Whatever you're feeling, Ms. Okonkwo, it's yours alone." She moved closer, her reflection joining his in the window. "Then what is this? Why do I feel your loneliness like it's my own?" Finally, he turned to face her. In the dim light, he looked younger, more vulnerable. "Because loneliness recognizes loneliness. You felt it too, haven't you? The isolation of being different, of building walls because letting people in means giving them power to hurt you." His words struck too close to home. Lilith had spent 3 years in Seoul keeping everyone at arm's length, focused only on survival and success. She had friends like Amara, but no one who truly knew her. No one she trusted with her whole heart. "That doesn't explain why you bit me," she said. "I bit you because I wanted you to fear me." His admission was raw, honest. "Everyone fears me, and their fear feeds me, sustains me. But you looked at me like I was just a man. An arrogant man, perhaps, but just a man. And I couldn't stand it. I needed you to see the monster. And now I realize I bit the wrong woman." He laughed, bitter and sad. Or perhaps exactly the right one, depending on perspective. "Your blood awakened something I thought died centuries ago. Humanity. Feeling. The capacity to care about someone other than myself." Lilith studied his face, searching for lies, for manipulation. But all she saw was truth, painful and vulnerable. "I should hate you. You should. I should walk away and never look back. You should. But I can't." The admission tore from her throat. "God help me. I can't stop wondering what it would be like. To let the monster in. To see if there's a man underneath." Sung Bae's eyes widened. "Lilith. Don't." She held up a hand. "Don't say anything. Just tell me the truth. All of it. No more secrets. If I'm bound to you, I deserve to know what I'm bound to." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then sit. This will take time." And so, as Seoul slept around them, Park Sung Bae told her everything. 300 years of existence, of watching civilizations rise and fall, of building empires in the shadows. He told her about the loneliness of immortality, the slow death of feeling anything at all, the moment he'd realized he'd become the very monster he'd once feared. "I fed on fear because fear was simple," he explained. "It required nothing from me. But then you came, with your defiance and your strength, and suddenly fear wasn't enough. I wanted more. I wanted to understand what made you different. And when you bit me, I tasted sunlight, he said simply. Warmth and life and everything I'd lost. It burned through me like fire, waking parts of myself I thought dead. And I realized that I'd found something far more addictive than fear. What? He met her eyes, and in them she saw something that made her heart race. Hope. The word hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Lilith wanted to deny it, to laugh it away, but the bond between them pulsed with truth. She felt his hope, desperate and terrified, like a drowning man glimpsing air. You're asking me to care about a monster, she whispered. I'm asking you to see past the monster, to consider that perhaps redemption is possible, even for creatures like me. And if I say no, pain flashed across his face. Then I honor my promise. You walk away free. Lilith stood, pacing to the window. Seoul spread beneath her, a city of lights and shadows, of beauty and danger intertwined. She thought of her journey here, of everything she'd sacrificed for survival. She thought of her family's joy when their debts disappeared. She thought of the emptiness in her own heart that she'd tried so hard to ignore. I need you to understand something, she said, not turning to face him. I'm not some prize to be won. I'm not a salvation project for your guilt. If anything happens between us, it's because I choose it. Freely. Not because of bonds or bites or blood. I understand. And you have to earn it. My trust. My anything. You have to prove that you're more than the monster who attacked me. I will. The certainty in his voice made her turn. He stood now, his expression fierce and determined. I'll spend however long it takes proving I'm worthy of you, Lilith Okonkwo. Even if it takes decades. Decades? She raised an eyebrow. Confident. Desperate, he corrected. There's a difference. Despite everything, Lilith felt her lips curve into a smile. Then you'd better start now, Park Sung Bae. Because I don't wait around for anyone. His answering smile was like dawn breaking, transforming his cold features into something almost beautiful. Then it's fortunate I'm immortal. I have all the time in the world. The months that followed were unlike anything Lilith had experienced. Sung Bae kept his promise. He didn't push, didn't demand, didn't use the bond to manipulate. Instead, he courted her in ways both grand and subtle. He learned her favorite foods and had them delivered from the best Nigerian restaurant in Seoul. When she mentioned missing home, he arranged a video call system so she could talk to her family whenever she wanted. When she complained about the winter cold, her apartment's heating system was upgraded overnight. But the greatest changes were in him. Slowly, carefully, Park Sung Bae began dismantling the empire of fear he'd built. He met with his business associates in daylight now, the heavy curtains in his office pulled back. He smiled at his employees, learned their names, asked about their families. The terror that had permeated Park Tower began to fade, replaced by something almost like respect. You're changing him, Amara observed one evening over dinner. She'd finally gotten Lilith to explain the truth about Sung Bae, and to Lilith's surprise, her friend had taken the vampire revelation remarkably well. I've heard people talking. They say Park Sung Bae is almost human now. He's trying, Lilith said quietly. That's all any of us can do. And you? Are you falling for him? Lilith thought about the question carefully. Was she falling? Or had she already fallen, tumbling into something that should terrify her, but somehow felt like coming home? I think, she said slowly, I'm learning that monsters are more complicated than stories make them seem. And that sometimes, the scariest thing isn't the darkness in others, but recognizing it in yourself. Deep. Amara grinned. Also, totally not an answer. Also totally the truth. But alone, in the quiet moments when the bond pulsed between them, Lilith admitted what she couldn't say aloud. Yes, she was falling. Against all logic, all reason, all self-preservation. She was falling for a vampire who'd bitten her, and in doing so, had found his humanity again. The turning point came 6 months after that first bite. Lilith was working late, installing new security measures in Park Tower's lower levels, when she heard it. A crash, then voices, angry and violent. She followed the sound to a maintenance corridor and found Sung Bae surrounded by 4 men, Asian but not Korean, their eyes glowing red in the darkness. Vampires. The great Park Sung Bae, one of them hissed. We heard rumors you'd gone soft. Feeding on willing donors now? Following human laws? You're a disgrace to our kind. Sung Bae's voice was cold, controlled. Leave. Now. Before I remind you why you used to fear me. We don't fear you anymore." The vampire lunged. What followed was violence beyond anything Lilith had imagined. Sung Bae moved like water and shadow, his centuries of existence evident in every precise strike. But there were 4 of them, and they were younger, stronger, not weakened by compassion or humanity. She watched as they drove him to his knees, watched as his blood, spilled across the floor. And something inside her snapped. Lilith didn't think. She grabbed a broken pipe from the wall and swung with all her strength, catching the nearest vampire across the face. He shrieked, stumbling back, and the others turned to her with expressions of hungry delight. Well, one purred. "The human pet. Is this what softened you, Sung Bae? This fragile little thing. Touch her." Sung Bae's voice was death itself. "And I will erase your entire bloodline from existence." But they didn't listen. One moved toward Lilith, fangs bared, and she swung the pipe again. This time, he caught it, wrenching it from her hands and throwing her against the wall. Pain exploded through her body, and she tasted blood. Then Sung Bae was there, and the monster she'd glimpsed that first night in his wine cellar emerged fully. He tore through the attacking vampires with savage efficiency, his fangs and claws rending flesh, his ancient power overwhelming their youth. It was terrifying and magnificent, and when it was over, when 4 vampire corpses lay dissolving into ash around them, Sung Bae stood trembling, covered in blood, his eyes wild. "Lilith." He reached for her, then stopped, staring at his blood-stained hands. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to see that." She pushed herself up, ignoring the pain in her ribs, and crossed to him. Without hesitation, she took his bloodied hands in hers. "I'm not sorry," she said firmly. "I'm grateful. You protected me. I'm a monster. You're my monster." The words escaped before she could stop them, and she saw his eyes widen. "Yes, you're dangerous. Yes, you're capable of terrible things. But so is any creature fighting to protect what it loves." "What it loves," he repeated, his voice breaking. "Lilith, I know." She stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the cold of his body, the trembling of his control. "I feel it through the bond. Your fear that I'll see you as a monster. Your hope that I'll see you as a man. Your love. I don't deserve. Probably not." She smiled. "But I'm choosing you anyway. Isn't that what you wanted? For me to choose freely?" "Yes, but..." Lilith pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. "Then hear me choose. I choose you, Park Sung Bae. Monster, man, vampire, CEO, whatever you are. I choose all of it." For a moment, he simply stared at her. Then, with a sound that was half laugh, half sob, he pulled her into his arms. "You're insane. Completely." She rested her head against his chest, hearing the slow beat of his undead heart. "We're both insane. I'll spend eternity making myself worthy of this choice." "Just start with tomorrow," she murmured. "Eternity can wait." The following year passed like a dream. Sung Bae continued his transformation, becoming not just accepted but beloved in Seoul's business community. Park Enterprises shifted focus from shadowy enterprises to legitimate businesses, building housing for low-income families, funding scholarships, creating jobs. And through it all, Lilith stood beside him. Not behind him, not beneath him, but beside him as his equal. She expanded her security company, hired employees, built something of her own that had nothing to do with him. Because she'd meant what she said, she was no one's prize or project. She was her own woman, who happened to love a vampire. Their relationship wasn't easy. There were nights when his darkness overwhelmed him, when he'd disappear into his private quarters and emerge days later, hollow-eyed and haunted. There were moments when the bond felt like chains rather than connection, when feeling his pain alongside her own became too much to bear. But there were also moments of startling beauty, like the night he took her to the roof of Park Tower and showed her soul as only a vampire could see it, through eyes that perceived every shade of darkness, every hidden corner, every secret the city kept. Or the morning she woke to find him standing by her window, curtains open despite the approaching dawn, risking the sunlight just to watch her sleep. "You're going to burn," she'd murmured sleepily. "Worth it," he'd replied, and she'd seen the truth in his eyes. 9 months after she'd chosen him, Lilith received a call from Lagos. Her mother's voice was thick with tears, but for once they were tears of joy. "Your sister, she got into medical school. Full scholarship, Lilith." Our baby girl is going to be a doctor." Lilith hung up and cried, overwhelmed by the realization that everything she'd worked for, everything she'd sacrificed and risked and chosen, had led to this moment. Her family thriving, her business flourishing, her heart full despite its impossible circumstances. Sung Bae found her on the roof, tears streaming down her face, and simply held her. No words, no questions, just presence. Through the bond, he felt everything, her joy, her grief for all the years she'd spent alone building toward this, her gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "For what?" "For making me feel less alone." His arms tightened around her. "You were never alone, Lilith. You just hadn't found someone brave enough to stand beside your fire without trying to extinguish it." She pulled back to look at him. This vampire who'd learned humanity from her blood, who'd dismantled his empire of fear for the chance to build something better. "And you? Are you still lonely?" "How could I be?" His smile was soft, genuine, nothing like the cold smirks she'd first known. "I have you." Forever is a long time for a vampire and a human. Something flickered in his eyes, hope and fear and question. "It doesn't have to be." Lilith's breath caught. She understood what he was offering. The gift and the curse of immortality. The chance to stand beside him not just for her human lifetime, but for centuries beyond. "I'm not ready for that conversation," she said honestly. "Not yet. I'll wait." He cupped her face gently. "I'd wait 1,000 years if that's what you needed." "You might not have to wait that long." She leaned into his touch. "But I need to live first, Sung Bae. Really live. Build my empire the way you built yours. Make my mark on this world as a human before I decide whether to leave humanity behind. Then I'll watch you build," he promised. "And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." That night, Lilith returned to her apartment, her own space that she'd kept despite Sung Bae's offers to move into his penthouse. She needed this, her independence, her reminder that she'd chosen him but hadn't lost herself in the choosing. Amara was waiting with wine and knowing looks. "So, how was your vampire boyfriend today?" "Dramatic as always." Lilith accepted a glass, settling onto her worn couch. "He offered me immortality." Amara nearly choked on her wine. "What?" And I said not yet. Maybe never." Lilith swirled the wine, watching it catch the light. "Is that crazy? Turning down the chance to live forever?" "Girl, nothing about your life is normal enough to call anything crazy." Amara laughed. "But seriously, what do you want?" "I want what I've always wanted. To build something that matters. To take care of my family. To live without regrets." She paused. "And maybe, eventually, to grow old with someone who understands that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about choosing to heal. Even if that someone is technically dead, especially if." Lilith smiled. "Because he taught me that death isn't the opposite of life. Fear is. And I refuse to let fear make my choices anymore." The seasons turned. Lilith's security company grew into one of Seoul's most respected, known not just for technical excellence, but for fair treatment of employees and commitment to community safety. She hired other immigrants, other women who'd come to Korea seeking opportunity and found barriers instead. Sung Bae's transformation continued. Park Enterprises became known for ethical business practices, for treating workers with dignity, for investing in Seoul's future rather than exploiting its present. The vampire who'd once fed on fear now fed on something far more sustaining: purpose. But the vampire world didn't appreciate his changes. It started with whispers. Park Sung Bae had gone soft. Park Sung Bae had betrayed his nature. Park Sung Bae had become a pet to humans, neutered and pathetic. Then the whispers became challenges. They came at twilight, a delegation of 5 ancient vampires, each century older than Sung Bae, each representing a different territory across Asia. They demanded an audience, and because vampire law was absolute, Sung Bae couldn't refuse. He would either fight them to protect his woman or die trying. "Watch out,"